Thank you very much. Very happy to be here this evening. I don't know if there are people that maybe are in countries where it's morning, so maybe good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. It's a pleasant pleasure for me to be here to engage with you on this very important subject matter that we are discussing. I think it's an important issue because it addresses the need of the current and also the future generations. So this is why for me I find it to be quite fundamental and leading for impact. When this was sent to me, I was thinking, wow, what a powerful module this is supposed to be. And so I'm happy to be here. Like you're told, my name is Juma Ignatius. I'm a Kenyan citizen. I think I can confidently say that I'm also a youth. I'm yet to reach 35 years. So I'm 32 now. So I can maybe say that I'm a youth. I'm also a student, currently doing my PhD in environmental and policy at the University of Nairobi. So very happy to be here. And of course, I'll be engaging you for the next, I was told is 1.5 hours. How I want it to go, or how I propose it to go, is that I will try to make a presentation in the first 45 or so minutes, and then we'll open it up for discussions and deep dives from each and everybody from wherever you are. First, because for me, I understand that no one has the monopoly of knowledge on any subject. So I know that even you here, you have something you can share to educate me. And I also have something probably they can pass across to educate us all. To be able to tackle the topic of today, I prepared some presentations, which I'd want to share with you now. Can you let me know if you can see the screen, and then we can progress?
Yeah, we can see the slides.
Yes. So to help me like delve into the questions appropriately, I tried to come up with a question of how can youth be engaged to enhance sustainability as a whole. And some of the important issues I'd like to address in my presentation is first to understand why the youth and how can the youth lead impact. What does it really mean to even for the youth to lead, and what does it mean to lead for impact? That matter. And then, but also because you're looking at the question of sustainability to try and understand what is the history of sustainability, where does it come from, where is it headed? And of course, as we look at all this, we'll be answering the question, what can the youths do to ensure that we achieve the sustainability that we all yearn for? To also understand that, of course, there'll be the question of environmental governance and interlinkages with sustainability. And of course, also trying to answer the question of what role can the youths play to ensure that we achieve this environmental governance and the sustainability that we all, again, are yearning for. Because I've been told that most of you are university students, I think the question of career paths, like what career can you take if you are following this subject of sustainability and maybe environmental governance? What are some of the opportunities that are there, and how can you get in? And maybe what skill sets do you need to start working on now as you prepare for that work life maybe that you're aiming for, or maybe that you're already doing now? How can you be able to pivot yourself to ensure that you suit appropriately into the space that you want to be in? After that, of course, we will be looking at the question and answer section, where I said that I'll be expecting to hear also inputs from your side to get to know what you've learned up to now. I've been told that you've had this module. So also getting to learn from you what you've learned, what maybe some of the questions that you'd want maybe for me to shed light on more, or also for you to just educate me and what have you. So to begin us off, I'm a Christian, so I always like to begin with this Bible verse in the book of Timothy. I think 2 Timothy, that says that do not let anyone look down upon you because you are young. So do not let anyone look down upon you are young, just because you are a youth. So, and people to think that you cannot do anything, or maybe you can't lead. I think the essence of the model to be taking is that you are able to become a leader, but not just a leader, but one that is impactful in whatever they are doing. So to begin us off, I'll want us just to ask ourselves one question: that why the youth? So this conversation could have been about any group of people. Could have been about men, could have been about women, could have been about children. But the question here is why the youth? So why the selection of the youth? And there are a number of reasons why the youth are an important segment of the society, and they should be taken with the utmost seriousness that is required. One is because as we all know, there's always that aspect of the freshness of perspectives. That yes, we have the older generations maybe that have led us up to where we are at the moment. But as they have led us, we've learned a few things. We've taken lessons from where they have failed. And with this freshness, we are able to provide new sets of ideas that can take us again to another level as humanity. There's also the assumption or the belief, again, which I believe is true, is that the youth are inheriting the future. That there's a very high likelihood that the people that are young now will be there maybe for the next 50 years, 60 years, 70 years, or even maybe 100 years. So the future is there for the youth. So if they're not able to lead, or if they're not prepared adequately to be able to provide the leadership that is required, then we will be setting up ourselves for failure. We also know that youths are owners of energy and drive, so it's essential to capacity build them with these essential leadership capacities to ensure that with the energy that they have, they're able to drive for that positive change that humanity and the world seeks for at large. The other thing I think that's quite maybe common with the Kenyan youth, and I know it cuts across again with all the youths in the world, is that we've seen youths are the people that have the courage to challenge either injustices that could be existing in the society, or it could also be just be the status quo. There's a way things have been done for many years. Some people have come like used to the way it happens, and even if something good is supposed to happen, people kind of tend to shy away from this, especially the older generation. They want to maintain that which they already know. But we've seen youths challenging the status quo and bring about meaningful changes that have impacted societies positively. Just to give an example, recently, I know if you're in Kenya, the Gen Z demonstrations, we know what they have led to in this country. You can also look at the question of South Africa, the children and the youth in South Africa when they came up to fight against the injustice of apartheid. And today, South Africa is able to enjoy what they enjoy because of what the youths were able to do in their country. But now, even with this, even with all this knowledge, with all this energy to drive change, with the fact that we are saying the youth are going to inherit the future and all that, I think the fundamental question that we should be asking ourselves on why the youth is also the question of, but what really is a leader that is able to, who is a leader that's able to provide that impact that we are all yearning for? And I want to believe that in this context is the positive impact that the world will be looking towards. So I got again a number of items that I think are relevant if you want to be a leader of impact. One, a leader of impact, I suppose, is one that is knowledgeable. So we've seen people that claim to be leaders, but they do not understand subjects that they're speaking about. So for example, assuming you want to be a leader in the sustainability space or the climate space, are you enriching yourself with the relevant knowledge to ensure that you're able to address whatsoever topic that comes up in the space that you're taking up? Or you want to be that person that if you ask a question in the sphere which you want to take control of, you just mumble words and you don't know what to say. So knowledge is fundamental if you want to ensure that you are a leader of impact, and in this case, a youthful leader of impact. The other component that I think is very relevant is the aspect of, because of the knowledge that you have, you're able to empower others. And as such, you are not achieving the impact as an individual, but the impact that we sought for it becomes a collective. So you empower others and they're able to come up also and support you in achieving the vision that you have. And of course, now that leads me to the other point of being visionary. That as a youth, as a youth leader that wants to have impact, you must have some sort of a vision. Where do you want to take your people? Do you just want to lead for the sake of leading, or what, if we are going to follow you as a people in the society, where are you really taking us? This is very, very fundamental. And lastly, but not least, of course, is what kind of change are you creating in the society? That we need to see you create some tangible change in the society that can be able to also influence others to follow what you are doing as a person. Here again, I can give the example of Southern Africa. We know of the example of Nelson Mandela, that because he believed in something bigger than him and was able to create movements within the country, that even when he was imprisoned, that the spirit did not die. The people continued carrying on with the vision until he came out of prison. And as we all know, probably, is that he stayed at Robben Island for 21 years. But it's because of the vision that was able to carry him forward to achieving whatever he'd began. So when I was given this topic to speak about, again, I tried to ask myself a few questions. And with this, I was trying to look at the objectives of the learnings that you've been having. So I was told that at the end of this, you should be able to explain the role of youth in catalyzing climate action in the transition world towards sustainable development future, and then examine climate policies and initiatives where youth can actively contribute and lead, and of course, engage in decision-making processes on climate action at local, national, and international levels. And then develop leadership competencies required to drive sustainability initiatives, including strategic thinking, decision-making, and the ability to motivate and inspire teams. The other one, of course, was explain specific skills, competencies, and qualifications required for different career paths in climate change and sustainable development. So as I try to speak about the topic today, I'll try to be responding to these objectives, and hopefully I'll be useful to you all as you continue listening to me as I progress. So to begin us off in the discussion for today, I thought that it's vital for us to understand more so the history of sustainable development. Where does it come from? Like what led to what we are speaking about today? It's very important. We've said that if you want to be that leader that is impactful, it's fundamental that you are equipped with the necessary knowledge that can be able to help you to, first of all, even communicate the ideas that you have. So for a long time, the world population has been increasing at higher rates. So after World War II, we know that the world has been increasing, and also because of the development in the science and knowledge, the populations are continuing to increase day by day. But as they increase, we notice that the resources that we have in the world have remained static. And as such, this poses some sort of a challenge. So people increasing, but the water remaining the same. People increasing, the land remaining the same. People increasing, the air that we breathe is remaining the same. So the question here, it came out some years back in 1968, where people thought about it and said that probably it is essential that we come up in a way that will be able to control or be able to ensure that there's some sort of balance on how the population there is growing and how people are also, the way the population is growing and the resources that we have in the world today. And this is where we hear the concept of the Club of Rome. This was essentially an informal organization of intellectuals and business leaders whose goal was critical, especially in terms of discussing pressing global issues. So there's the question, because the people are increasing, it means that there'll be competition for resources. So again, here, this would have ramifications on the peace of the world. Because people are competing for jobs, or maybe even also for food, it means that we could be able maybe to have detrimental effects to biodiversity. So this Club of Rome, that was some sort of an elite group of people that came together, They came together with the intention of trying to look at how can we be able to address the whole question of population growth and how to balance with the resources that we have in the world. So when they met later, there was this very important report that was produced. It's referred to as the limits to growth. So this club of Rome was noting that from 1900 to 1972, there has been a high population growth. And of course, like I said before, the increase, while commendable, brought pressure to the earth and its resources. And with this in mind, there had to be some sort of a regulation to bring balance between humans and the utilized resources. So out of this, multiple initiatives were proposed to world states on how to best ensure that this balance is achieved. And you know that for us to be able to regulate human behavior, one of the key tools that has been used since time immemorial is some sort of rules or principles that are set out. So we see that from then, when this limit to growth report is coming out, environmental law starts to develop, and a basic concept or principles which underpin its rules are developed from this stage. So these principles that were developed then are the same principles up to today that still govern the structure of environmental law as we know it to date. These principles, if you look at them, they are mostly all or more or less in the form of solemn declaration or principles, which are normally global or regional in nature. So they are formed either by institutions like the United Nations, or also you can have regional organizations like the EAC, the SADC, or any other regional organization coming up with their own sets of principles that would be able to guide how their people will be able to interact with the environment that they live in. So these principles, they have, I would say, a wide influence in the operation and the interpretation of environmental law. So how the environmental law is interpreted is heavily influenced by these principles that have been developed since 1968, and we'll see the history and how this has grown as we progress. But then just to understand that, I think it's fundamental that we understand also how environmentalism has evolved since, again, the Club of Rome meeting. So we'll note that after this report came out, the report of the limit to growth, there was an increased rise and development of environmental awareness and advocacy. And maybe here I'd like also to challenge you that if you want to read a piece that maybe speaks about how environmental law and environmentalism started to come up, if you can look at the question of the Silent Spring, there's a book, a very short thesis by the name The Silent Springs. If you can read this one here, you can try to see how this lady that was living in Europe started witnessing the fact that sometimes in spring, when growing up, she was seeing birds singing outside her window. But after some time, she started noticing that the birds at some point stopped singing and everything just became dull. So documenting her experiences, she became an advocate for environmental protection to ensure that she continues to hear the birds singing. And then also environmentalism was embodied in the social and political movements, efforts to control pollution, of course, also human population growth, conservation of natural resources, restriction of negative effects of modern technology, and the adoption of environmental benign forms of political and economic organization, among others. So, like I said, everything when it's done in excess always, of course, has ramifications. So in this case also, when human population was growing at unprecedented rates, it meant that it was impacting something negatively. So ways had to be found to ensure that some sort of balance, like I said before, is achieved. At the same time, we also know that 1968 and also before, there were technologies that were being used, developed, and also being adopted by countries, and these were having far-reaching consequences to the environment. So, for example, there was the nuclear energy that was being used in wars, and we know that when released to the atmosphere, it has negative ramifications. We can speak about, for example, about the Nagasaki, Hiroshima case, where till today, people there are still experiencing the negative consequences of such innovations. Also, environmentalism is credited with development of treaties, convention, and other instruments of environmental law addressing problems on myriad environmental issues. So, for example, there's the question of the global warming, depletion of the ozone layer, depletion of species. So the entire question of the global commons, that people now who are rushing to go towards the space. And as we all know, space is not owned by everyone, by anyone. Like, it's a resource that's supposed to be owned by everyone. But as we know, only countries that have the relevant technologies and the means to go there mostly do take advantage of this and utilize it more for their benefit. But even as they do this, of course, it has far-reaching implications. On the global warming side, we see the Industrial Revolution, for example, in Europe, emitting fumes to the atmosphere because they were using mostly fossil fuels in the form of coal. And this again had ramification to the ozone layer. And of course, as we know, this was leading to global warming. Like, sun rays were passing through the ozone layer easily and as such impacting people negatively. So cases of cancer, skin cancer were in the increase. So people again were thinking, how can we be able to deal with these challenges that are facing us now? And of course, also we know that there's been depletion of species. So I know that all of us here may probably have read of dinosaurs, but I'm so sure again, none of us has ever seen a dinosaur. So the question is, what was leading to the depletion of these species? So people are coming out and asking themselves, how can we be able to ensure that we do not deplete these species from the Earth's surface? Because they all contribute in one way or the other in maintaining the balance that's required for our life. Also, with landmark global environmental meetings. So after 1968, 1972, we see a meeting in Stockholm, the first meeting where it's held, and in 1972, and then the UNEP, United Nations Environmental Program, is also established. And then we go later, we see another meeting that's happening in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, where again, the concept of sustainable development are now starting to pick more momentum and running more and more. So maybe just if I go back. So from the conference in 1992 of the Rio Declaration is where we see the whole concept of sustainable development really taking shape and coming up. And also we know that after this, we see like the first COPs are starting to being organized, and people are coming up together more and more to ensure that they create institutions that will be able to address some of the challenges that the world is facing in a more concerted effort. So here again, if you're a student of international relations, probably this is the question where the aspect of multilateralism, that the world now is coming to the realization that you cannot tackle some of the problems alone as a state. So for example, the question of global warming, even if you have all the money, all the technology in the world, it is not possible to address it alone, that it requires the concerted effort of all the nations to come together to ensure that you fight it as a unit and not as a single entity. So you proceed like that, and then later we see in 1997, we see the Kyoto Protocol coming up, and then in 2015, we see the creation or the adoption of the Paris Agreement that specifically deals on the climate change issues. In the next slides, I'd want now to speak specifically on the key concepts and principles that underpin the understanding of sustainable development and what it really means from a legal and a policy perspective. And in this section here, I'll also be speaking and try to share practical examples of what I think the youth can be able to do to ensure that we achieve the sustainable development that we seek to achieve. So I'll be sharing 10 concepts or also principles. One of these, of course, is the subject of today, sustainable development. So this concept evolved out of the realization that the world environment, its economies, and the way it treats its human and animal inhabitants are interlinked. So it was essentially given prominence by this report, another report again that came out called the Brundtland Report, which defined it as follows. So sustainable development defined by the Brundtland Report, that development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of the future generations to meet their own needs. So here, simply put, is that you are living today, you have water, but also this water will be required by future generations. So please use it well to ensure that future generations also do not suffer the pain of not having water just because the previous generation misused it or did not maybe take care of the sources of water. So this concept of sustainable development, it rejects all precepts of short-term economic or industrial growth, which ignore conservation measures. So again, simply put, is that it says, yes, develop all the way you want, please industrialize all you want, but also ensure that when you are developing and growing, that you are also taking into consideration the needs of future generations. So again, I go back to the principles of the Stockholm Declaration that was in 1972, paragraph 4 of the World Charter of Nature, and then principle 3 of the Rio Declaration, 1992, and then article 6A of the CBD. CBD is the Convention on Biodiversity, and then also article 3.1 of the United Nations Framework on Climate Change. Also, if you want to bring it maybe closer home, for the people of Kenya, Article 69 of the Kenyan Constitution, and also in MCA 1999, they all have embedded this important principle of sustainable development as part of the law. So, for example, in Kenya, you see that sustainable development is not just a principle or a declaration, it's part of the Constitution of Kenya. And also, if you want to go deeper, if you read maybe Article 2.5 and Article 2.6 of the Kenyan Constitution, it normally declares that for every treaty or international agreement that Kenya has signed and ratified, it becomes part and parcel of Kenyan laws. So in this case, sustainable development is not just an idea in Kenya, it's part and parcel of the laws of the land. The other important principle or concept that underpins the whole question of sustainability is that of inter and intergenerational equity. I want you to note is inter and intra. So intergenerational equity is a principle correlate of the principle of sustainable development. So very much like almost interlinked with what sustainable development speaks about. It calls for environmental protection, not just for current generations, but for future generations as well. Intra is equity within a generation. So here it's looking at the questions of poverty, gender, and vulnerability. Understanding the fact that different people are impacted differently when there are impacts, for example, of climate change. And as such, when addressing or providing solutions, that we should be able to look at it from this angle where with the realization that each and every unit of the society might be impacted differently. Also, just to note this, is that it's amongst the principles of the Stockholm Declaration. It talks here, the Stockholm Declaration, a solemn responsibility to protect and improve the environment for present and future generations. And then again, if you go to principle 3 of the Rio Declaration, it speaks about the right to development must be fulfilled so as to equitably meet development and environmental needs of present and future generations. So it's not always about just us. It's also about what about those that will come after us. We must do whatever we are doing with them in our minds. So if you try to maybe to interpret it, there are two interpretations that you can try to give this from a legal perspective. That one, must the next generation inherit a stock of environmental assets? So for example, green fields, clean air, etc. No less than the stock we inherited. So essentially, this is what it means, that the question means that for whatever generation that is going to come after us, they're also supposed to inherit almost, or they are supposed to inherit the same quality of resources that we've inherited from our past generations. This means that it's about leaving the next generation a stock of assets which comprises of environmental assets, technological assets, and know-how. And of course here, just to ensure that that environmental resources became trade-off for technology as long as appropriate living standards for future generation is secured. Maybe just to give you also a case here, and if any of you is interested from a legal perspective to understand just what this principle has been able to play from in legal circles, there's a case in the Philippines that was called the Opposa versus Factorum case. So Opposa was Opposa is a company is a company in Opposa was a father to a young son in Philippines, but there's the factory in Philippines that was involved in lumbering, and so this Opposa went to court to try and challenge the decisions of the factory to continue cutting trees down irresponsibly, because the argument was that when they continue cutting down the trees irresponsibly, it means that his son, which are like the next generation, will not be able to enjoy the same resources that they're enjoying today. So in this case, you see a clear example where a man that's living now, so like an older man living today, looking out for the interest of a younger son that will come maybe live more years after he's gone, and trying to look for judicial redress that will ensure that his son, when he's grown up in future, he'll also be able to enjoy that same resource that he's enjoying currently. So if you want to look at this case, I think it's one that really brings out the key facets of inter and intergenerational equity. The other key principle of sustainability is that of public participation. Essentially, this one here is simply put is that nothing is done for us without us. In many jurisdictions across the world and Africa as well, we now know that the principle of public participation is well known and taken, I think, in very many constitutions around the world. The principle points to the need to empower civil society in decision-making and empowering members of public to enforce environmental protection through judicial or non-administrative procedures. So public participation, like I've said, may be provided through at least 3 legal machineries. One is entrenchment in national constitution as part of the Bill of Rights. So for example, in Kenya, in Chapter 4 of the Constitution, public participation is part of the Bill of Rights. There's also public participation in the review of EIS. EIS is simply environmental impact assessment. This is what is done to projects, mega development projects. Before they are done, they are supposed to undergo what is called the EIA, environmental impact assessment. Essentially asking yourself that the project you are doing, will it have any impact to the environment? And if yes, what remedies are you putting in place to ensure that those impacts are mitigated? Again, this principle, if you want to see it again, it's enshrined in the Principle 10 of the Rio Declaration. The other key principle, and I'm trying now to go faster so that we can have more time to speak. I see I still have 24 minutes, then you can go to the discussions. Is the principle of do no harm. So no harm rule. This principle is one of the most important really principles of environmental law. Why? It's because we know that environmental tragedies are not bound by the boundaries that we have as countries. That if you are polluting the environment in Kenya, there's a very high chance that that might have ramifications to Uganda, to Tanzania, to Ethiopia, and all those, like maybe the countries that you're bordering you. So in this case, this rule essentially calls for countries to carry out whatever development they want to carry up, but in doing so, they should ensure that whatever they do does not impact negatively other countries that maybe they could be bordering, or maybe they could also be far. And here again, to give you a classic example, is on the question of the River Nile. As we all know, the source is at Lake Victoria, I think in Uganda, in Jinja. But the same river flows all the way to Egypt, where it's very instrumental for the survival of Egypt. Actually, it's been said that if the River Nile was to be done away with, the entire country of Egypt will also be wiped out, because this is what holds the country together in terms of irrigating its agricultural sector and providing food. So any country that's along the River Nile, it's required to ensure that even if it's using the waters in whatever way they're using it, they should ensure that whatever action they take will not have any harm to the River Nile, and also and consequentially, of course, to the people of Egypt that depend on it for their survival. So I think that what I've just explained, this principle again is enshrined in Principle 2 of the Rio Declaration. Importantly to note is that it seeks to balance between the territorial sovereignty of a state and the wider responsibility to the international community. Also, if you want to go deeper, the principle appears in 1979 Geneva Convention on long-range transboundary pollution, the 1985 Vienna Convention on of the ozone, and of course also the 1989 Basel Convention on hazardous waste. So many countries now in the world have accepted this principle as a principle of customary international law. So because it has been widely used, and there are lots of opinions by legal scholars that it holds as a principle of international law, many countries now apply it as part of their laws. There are also cases of the ICJ when it gave its opinion on the legality of the threat or use of nuclear weapons in 1961. So if you want, again, this, you can look at the 1996 case ICJ reports. It's in page 241 to 242, and it's paragraph 29. The other principle that really is very important in terms of ensuring sustainability in the world is that of the precautionary principle. And this principle for me is very important because it was developed to avoid the problem that scientific knowledge is often not sufficient to provide concrete evidence about environmental damage likely to arise from human action. So we know that when people want to do whatever they want to do, sometimes they might come backing their actions with all sorts of scientific knowledge. But this principle says that that alone is not sufficient to just say, yes, you can proceed. It primarily seeks to prevent damage, possible irreversible effects on human activity on the environment before the scientific community can agree on the precise nature of those effects. So for example, climate change, and also now we know biotechnology and how it's, for example, all aspects of bioengineering. So this principle says that before or absence of knowledge on how, for example, a certain intervention can affect people is not sufficient grounds to say that it's okay for it to proceed. That if people are able to raise objections, even if they're not even if there's something to the contrary of what they're saying, that this needs to be stopped. And until the scientific community or the people carrying out the project or development they are doing are able to prove these other people otherwise, that's when they're able to progress. Of course, this principle raises a number of different forms, One, like I said, is concerning likely effects of actions, development, and also the introduction of introduction of technologies. I don't know if some of you are familiar with the concepts of geoengineering. So we've heard of cases in Dubai where they say they make rainfall, their own artificial rainfall. But the question is, what is the impact of this to the wider environment that the world is in today? So again, it calls on states to err on the side of caution when taking steps to prevent environmental damage. Again, there are examples. I'll try not to look at that now. But just to tell you again, if you want to read more about this, you can find it in Principle 15 of the Rio Declaration. The next very important principle of sustainable development is that of polluter pays principle. Like the principle says on its own, is that if you pollute, then you're supposed to pay. So simply put, like I've said, if you are responsible for any sort of pollution in the environment, then you're supposed to be held accountable and pay for that kind of pollution that you've caused. This principle raises two main challenges. One, that of causation. The fact who do you think is the polluter? Do you think is the owner of the vehicle that is driving a vehicle that maybe is releasing fumes and emissions in the atmosphere, and the such causing maybe climate change? Or do you think is the manufacturer of the vehicle? Or also, do you think it's the producer of the fuel that is used to drive the car that's producing the emissions? So who really is responsible here? So when applying these principles, you try to look at the causation. Who is the cause of the problem that you are facing today? The other component, of course, that's very difficult also to assess is valuation. So what really here is the actual cost of a polluted environment? So for example, if you are an airline company and you are producing fumes in the atmosphere as you transport passengers across the globe, how much can you say it will cost for you to be able to to pay for the pollution that you cause? So it's not very easy to come up with such figures, but at least the principle is there to ensure that if you emit or whatever kind of pollution you're emitting, to some extent, you also provide some kind of remuneration that will be able to offset that damage that you've caused. Again, if you want to find this, you can find it in Principle 16 of the Rio Declaration. The other very important principle of sustainability that maybe we need to look into, and it's a principle that underpins international law globally, is the common but differentiated responsibility. So like I said at the beginning, there are some challenges that we face today as the world, where we face as a unit, but we have not contributed to the impacts together. So the question is, how do we ensure that while different people are impacted differently to the impacts, to maybe, for example, the impacts of climate change, how do we ensure that while we face it as a unit, but in terms of responsibility is differentiated? I'll explain here more. Africa as a continent, and we know that we have a population of 1.5 billion people currently, the continent is said to have emitted only 4% of the emissions that have caused climate change as we know it today. The West and the developed world as a whole, they bear the responsibility of having produced most of the emissions that have led to the impacts of climate change. So here you see that we all have a common problem. The problem is climate change. It is affecting us differently. And again, the continent of Africa, while it has contributed minimally, it is impacted more. So the question is, how do we bear the responsibility as the world? And this is why if you go to multilateral negotiations like the UNFCCC, the COP in this case, you find that developed nations are always asked to provide financial resources to help poorer nations, for example, Africa and other developing countries, to be able to withstand the impacts of climate change. So while we are facing the same challenge, the responsibilities is purely different. One is providing the resources and the technology, while the other is receiving the resources to ensure that it's able to withstand the impacts of climate change. I think I've explained that quite at length, and if you want to find it again, you can get it under Principle 7 of the Rio Declaration. Just to read what it says. In view of their different contribution to global environmental degradation, states have common but differentiated responsibilities. The developed countries acknowledge their responsibility that they have in the international pursuit of sustainable development in view of the pressure their societies place on the global environment and of the technologies and financial resources that they command. That since the economies are more developed, that they have more resources, and also since they're advanced in their technologies, that now it becomes the sole responsibility to provide these resources to other nations that do not have this capacity, so that they are able to withstand the impacts of climate change and be able to lead meaningful lives. I'll stop here again and just say that if you want to read this again, you can read chapter 3 of the United Nations Convention on Climate Change, because again, it's there and gives more details on how, for example, greenhouse emissions from developing countries have led to the impacts of climate change that we face today. The other key and important principle is that of international cooperation. And again, like I said, most of the challenges that we face in the environment, they are not limited to one country, but they are international in nature. Case in point is global warming, or also now climate change as we know it is not like a preserve of a particular country, but it's on all of us. It's affecting us differently. So how do we face this? We know that even as we face it differently, that to achieve any sort of meaningful progress or to be able to combat it, you cannot combat it alone. You need to have that kind of a concerted approach to come together, share ideas, share opinions, share knowledge, share experiences amongst countries to be able to combat this scourge. So again, here just use the case of the UNFCCC, where 197 countries usually unite every year to be able to assess the progress in which the world is tackling the impacts of climate change. So from 2015 to date, the world has been meeting in different parts of the world to ensure that it gets some solutions to the impacts of climate change. So just to give you an example here again, as we know, Africa is the least responsible but most impacted. So Africa has been calling for increased funding for climate adaptation. Probably some of you have heard about this. And there's that global push through an intervention known as the Global Goal on Adaptation, GGA. It's an abbreviation. And now the world is coming up with indicators to try and track how adaptation interventions in the world are being undertaken. And developed countries are being pressed to ensure that they provide money and also technology, but also capacity building to the developing world so that they can be able to withstand the impacts of climate change. The other principle that I think is also quite relevant yes, thank you. These last two principles are interrelated. So maybe if you just do one, it could be able to serve also maybe for the rest. Common heritage of mankind, also known as common heritage for humanity or humankind or common heritage principle. So this principle holds that territorial areas and elements of humanity's common heritage in this cultural and natural should be held in trust for future generations and protected from exploitation by individual nation states or corporations. So in this case, the human heritage that you have today, that how can we ensure that it's passed over again to the next generations? So this principle essentially calls for the protection of our heritage, that as we know it. There have been a number of scholars that have been writing about this, and examples include Immanuel Kant. So he had this essay called Towards Perpetual Peace, where he claimed that the expansion of hospitality with regard to use of the right to Earth's surface, which belongs to human race in common, would finally bring the human race even closer to a cosmopolitan constitution. So again, if you want to understand this more, please try to read the piece by Immanuel Kant, Towards Perpetual Peace, and maybe you can get more and more insights on what this principle really speaks about. But also, this principle really, if you want to look at it more deeply, it speaks about the Outer Space Treaty in 1967. And so this treaty is essentially is underpinned by this principle, but it speaks on how to be able to use and explore that which is in the outer space. So including the moon and other celestial bodies. So how do we use it? How do we explore these resources in a way that we ensure that not just for us, but also future generations to be able to get the same and be able to use the same and continue with it for their lives. Like I said, this is the last principle, and it's more or less the same to what I've talked about, common heritage of mankind. So I won't belabor you, I won't stress more you on this, but I'd like to go to this principle of common concern for mankind. Again, it's mostly underpins the CBD, the Convention on Biodiversity. So here, this principle essentially acknowledges the fact that change in Earth's climate and its adverse effects are a common concern for mankind. Just to proceed, it's notable first for what it does not include, i.e. is a reference to states. It's rather humanity as a whole, the individuals whose concerns are at issue. So there have been scholars again that have written about this, and if you want to read, I'll be sharing this presentation. You can read about them and see what that they can they have been able to espouse in regards to that subject. Now, maybe the most important part, even after, so I was doing this because I wanted to ensure that as we say that we want to become youths of impact, leaders that are of impact. We need to be leaders of impact that are knowledgeable, first of all, about the subject that we want to speak about. And these 10 principles that I've been able to share briefly, I believe that they can be able to build our capacity to be able to understand, especially the whole question of sustainability and the interlinkages to climate change and also development that I know that almost all the countries of Africa are yearning for. So after you are skilled with this knowledge, maybe the question would be, but then what do you do with this knowledge? And also knowing that these are university students, and like many of us, you go to school with the hope that after you can be able to get a job or a place where you can put your knowledge and skills into practice and also to help you earn a living. So I tried to map out some career paths that somebody with a skill set and a proper understanding of the sustainability question could be able to take. And I just have here a number of sectors, 6. I got around 6 areas that I think people that have adequate knowledge and skill set in sustainability or understanding of environmental policy and climate change as a whole could be able to go in. So one, of course, we know that in every country, I think the government plays a key role in terms of employing most of the citizenry. So the government could be able to employ you as maybe a climate policy advisor. You could also be a diplomat or a negotiator at the international levels on behalf of your country. You can also be a researcher in the respective ministries that you work that are in your countries. So, for example, the Ministry of Environment, or if you're in Kenya, also the Office of the Special Envoy for Climate Change could be a good place for you to land. But also, if you look at it, the whole question of sustainability is one that is cross-cutting, is not one that is in one area. So, Ministry of Education, for example, they would need somebody to advise them and tell them what it really means. What it really means to have education in a sustainable way. We also have intergovernmental organizations, and in this case, we have the United Nations. Here we have the African Union, we have the EU, we have the regional economic blocks. We have, for example, the SADCs of this world. We have the ECOWAS. We have ESC that could be able also to provide you with platforms where you can get in and maybe start to implement your skills there. Of course, like I said, there's also multilateral organizations that we have outside there. We have the UNDP, the UNEP, but maybe clear career paths could be you can become maybe a climate finance specialist. So I know there are people maybe probably doing finance and they're thinking, how can I link my finance with climate issues? So if you are interested in such areas, there's the subject of climate finance that you can start following, building your specialty slowly by slowly, and with time, you can be like the climate finance advisor for your country. There's also, of course, the questions of monitoring and evaluation. People that are able to monitor how laws and policies are being implemented in their respective jurisdictions, and maybe identify what are the gaps and provide advisory services to their governments. There's also think tanks and research institutions. So now there are people coming up with models, future models, for example, that try to predict what would happen with the continuing maybe state of affairs that we live in today. That could also be an area that you can work with, but there are also research institutions that will really take you in and try to maybe capitalize on your skill set. There's also the private sector. So many companies in the world today, they are enshrining the aspect of sustainability in their works. So for example, again, to use the example of Kenya, Safaricom, I know they have a sustainability unit where they just try to invest in sustainable ways in which they can operate as a company. Also, I know that EABL, the liquor company under Diageo, they also have a sustainability component where one can be able to work there and provide some sort of advice that will help them to ensure that they operate from a perspective of sustainable development. The other key and important area would be the media. And the media is a big employer of many people that are in the climate space. So you could be a climate journalist, for example. You could even start your own podcasts and or maybe be a writer. And yes, like be a writer, or just be a commentator on some of these environmental issues. And they could be able to provide some career pathways that could work for you. Last but not least, we know that we have very many CSOs in our different countries. So we have very many NGOs that are working on this subject. And like I've told you again, the subject is quite cross-cutting. So it's not limited to just one area. It can be in the sector of water, it can be in the sector of food, can be in the sector of health, can be in the sector of infrastructure. You just need to align yourself and build capacity of yourself in a niche area that you're interested in, and one that interests you. And from that, you are able to grow in and become better. So I know I'm saying that these are the career paths, but the question is, when you're going out there to look for a job, and I'm assuming I'm speaking maybe to people that are doing the undergraduates, you're going out there to look for a job, they will ask you, what skill set do you have? Because again, knowing these things, anybody can know them. And these things, again, I can assure you they're all in the internet and people can just Google and see them. But the question is, how do you translate knowledge to tangible evidence that could be able to help the company or the organization that you work for? I want to share an example here of, for example, being a writer. And sometimes myself, I write for the Daily Nation and also international media. So just opinion pieces. But I would like just to let us all know that these things don't just happen. It comes out, for you to be a good writer, it begins and it's only perfected if you start slowly practicing each and every day, and with time you become an expert. So you cannot wake up to tomorrow and say that you are a climate writer, for example, on any particular issue if you've not been trying. So my challenge to maybe some of you that may want to maybe take this part of writing is that there are available online platforms where you can have, for example, blogs. You can start writing there just for you, or maybe sharing with your friends. It could begin with 3 people, 2 people just reading your content. But with no time, or after some time, people will have known that person X or person Y writes about this subject. And as such, if you want to get an opinion, an expert opinion from this on this subject, you go to this blog or call this person. They're able to provide you with the relevant information that you seek. The other thing that I would like maybe to also to set out for is that knowledge is just knowledge, but until it is internalized in you, it's just there. It's just information. So another challenge is to build a skill set is to a culture of continuous reading and understanding the key issues and being able to breaking them down in simple formats that can be understood by anyone and everyone in the world. So every time you see, for example, a complex subject, try to think of a class 6 for the Kenyan context, or maybe a standard 6 child. In this case, I'm speaking about maybe an 11-year-old or 9-year-old. Can you speak to them a complex subject in a way that they can be able to understand? Because again, and I will tell you, having had now like 10 years experience in this space, simplicity is genius. If you're able to simplify complex issues into simple ways that anybody can understand, it becomes very easy for you to also market yourself as a person that can help organizations to break down complex issues. The other thing I'd like maybe just to set clear is for me the question of networking. I know it's a skill set that is not maybe not many people are born with, but it's something that can be practiced, and over time you can perfect it. That network, go to the relevant forums, go speak to the relevant people, ask important questions. I repeat this, ask important questions to relevant people, and also listen. So sometimes I know that also as young people, because, and I said that we have freshness in perspectives. So there's always the tendency to try and challenge even people that maybe have been in the space for a long time and understand the issues quite very well. My challenge to all of us is that sometimes it's also very wise to just sit back and listen to what the experienced people in the spaces that you want to venture in have experienced, what lessons have they learned, and what have been their mistakes, then try to learn from this. And then try to capitalize on the mistakes, of course, and gain more knowledge and sharpen your skill set even more and more. On the forums that I've talked about, like maybe the international forums that you can attend, there could be those meetings of governments organized around that maybe they want people to participate. Start slowly by participating, getting the knowledge, and with no time, you'll have built your capacity to be able to also maybe present it at a future point when you're called upon. Above all, in terms of career paths and skill sets, I would like to note that careers don't just happen, they are built, and it takes time. So also practice patience, even as you're working on your career and looking forward to what you want to do. Of course, have big dreams and ambitions, but above all, know that each and everything happens with time. I remember when I was beginning my career when I was 3 years experience. I used to apply for jobs and no one would call me for interviews. But I noticed that once I reached 5, 6, 7 years experience, almost every job I applied to, I used to get interviews. This does not say that, oh, I always got the jobs, but at least somebody was recognizing my experience and skill set that was bringing on board. Lastly, if you have the possibility of getting a career mentor or just a person to work with you and provide you with insights of an area that you are interested in, I believe it can be very instrumental in helping you craft the skills that you need to be able to be where you want to be. I will stop here and welcome all of us for any questions, deliberations that you might have. Thank you very much.
Karen, Stacy, I can see you've raised your hand. You can unmute. And also, if you have any question, you can just put it in the chat.
Okay, hello. Karen Stacy from Kisu University. Now, I had a question to the presenter. First of all, thanks for the presentation. It was very insightful. So, okay, in your career path, the role you are doing right now, your job, was it once part of your original career path, or did your path just evolve over time? Then also another question, we know that passion, you're always driven by passion. So what if you get a job that is not aligned with your passion? So how do you stay motivated to work along the line? You get, yeah, that's my question.
Okay, thanks, Karen Stacy. And yes, I think your questions are very important. In terms of my career path, it didn't just happen. Like I told you, for me, I began working actually when I was at the university. I was in 3rd year when I got a job in a bank. And from there on, I began, of course, slowly by slowly. I would be very honest also with you. This is not something I liked at the beginning because I did not have any kind of training from a finance perspective. And also from being a child, I was not so much of a person that was so much into numbers. But here, an opportunity presented itself in front of me, and I took it up and began with it slowly by slowly, learned a few things here and there that I never knew completely about finance and the banking world and how everything operates. But then later, this experience for me came to be very useful. So I was doing what we call trade finance, essentially international trade. And I didn't know how it would come to influence everything. But now in the role that I'm doing currently about climate policy and maybe advising the climate envoy on climate adaptation, one of the key challenges of the world that we face today is in the transportation sector, and trade plays a key role in transport, especially, for example, ships moving from one continent to another, bringing goods, maybe for example, to Africa. They have emissions. So you see, if you're able to understand how everything moves from one area to another, what instruments are involved, like you understand now the subject from a wholesome approach and not just from a climate angle. So my challenge to all of you, sometimes you can get something that maybe you think is not important or does not maybe align with the goals that you want to go to. My kind of advice or opinion would be that take it up, get the kind of skill set you might need to get from there. Probably everything won't be relevant that you learn from that, maybe that first job that you get. But with time, this experience that you get from that job, maybe that you don't like so much when you're just beginning, could come to be instrumental in future. Also, I know that there are people that could go to jobs and they just don't click completely and they don't work for them. If you are lucky enough to get alternatives that you can go to, I think again, it could be a good opportunity for you to just transition and to go to what really makes sense for you. For me, I'm lucky I began to somewhere that maybe I didn't enjoy so much, but even in being in that role, I learned many things that today are kind of contributing to the role that I am playing in my work currently. Hope I've answered you, Karen Stacy.
I can
Yes,
see
thank
James.
you, thank you.
James, I can see you have a question. You can unmute.
Thank you so much. I'm James Lemitaro, Kemu, Kenyatta Methodist University. Thank you, Juma, for the presentation. It was impactful. Mine is not actually the question, but just a sharing of something. And this is sustainable development. In the current world or in the globe, in every, even the government or the non-organizations, which are private institutions, in every project, you will find something like sustainable development. And I've just learned that in your principles, sustainable development is not just a concept, but it's a part and parcel of law. Now that sustainable development is a social economic growth that meets the needs of current generations without compromising the ability of the future generations to meet their needs. And if you see the Rio Declaration, which was 1970, that's actually more than 50 years up to now. And we are fighting for the climate change as our objective. But if you see, for example, Kenya, we have a lot of environmental issues, especially land degradation. What might be the problem? Where are we going wrong? What's exactly we are not meeting actually to get sustainable or sustainability in this climate change issue? Thank you so much.
Yes, thanks, James. Thanks, James. Maybe just to say, yes, the principle of sustainable development has been there since 1972, and also I think it gets more legal underpinning from the Rio Declaration 1992, and then in subsequent declarations, I know it's still, of course, it's still embedded there. So like I said, there's always the competing priority between people, the economic status that the people want to live in, and of course the environment. And unless countries are able to balance between the three, the economy, the people, and the environment, it means that sustainability is not being achieved. So if you're saying that there's increased degradation, maybe in Kenya and maybe also other parts of the continent, it means that we are simply just not meeting this balance between the three: the economy, development, and the environment that we are seeking for. So, of course, laws are put in place, but also, as we know, sometimes just because you have laws doesn't mean that they're implemented. So sometimes there also may be people that do not implement them or follow the laws to the letter. And we also know that for example, in many parts of Africa, we know that there's the greasing of hands, in quotes, maybe corruption that maybe impedes the full implementation of the law. And these have negative consequences, of course, as a whole. However, this is not lost because, again, the world continues to take note of the degradation that is happening. And we know that there are multilateral efforts globally to ensure that we even combat some of these challenges that we face today. So the question is, we cannot live in a utopia world. And the reason why we have, I think why we have laws is also because we know that it's human nature like to fall. So we need to continue maybe with this aspect of advocacy, speaking about sustainability, why it is important, educating more and more people on the subject for them to ensure that they understand the subject much better and better. And maybe at the end, we could be able to achieve the ideal situation that you are longing for. But as of now, it's a step-by-step process. And again, it's many countries with different interests coming together, working for the same goal. And sometimes the interest might differ with what other countries need. So in the long run, you find that you might end up not getting what you are set out to achieve just because maybe some people are not doing what we've agreed upon. But that doesn't mean that we give up on these concepts. We continue pushing on them, we continue advocating for them to ensure that we achieve the change that we yearn for.
Thank you so much.
Karibu.
The next person can continue. I can see Markwell video. You had raised your hand next. You can unmute.
Hello. Am I
Hey.
clear? Am I clear and laudable?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, you are.
Yes. Thank you so much, everyone, and I really thank you so much for the program. I'm Mokwir from Kenya Methodist University, and having learned from all the presentation, and I have a question to ask based on where I come from. I come from South Sudan. In South Sudan, we have a number of problems, but we cannot talk all those problems into this forum. So I have to talk about in regard to the topic, which is actually the issue of water. In the issue of water, we used to have water seen when we were young. We had abundance of water in our area. But right now, the water we have now, they are able to cause a lot of displacement to the human population. And at a time when this water try to drain it, then there's also a shortage of water. So like sometimes there is actually a conflict between the headers and the farmers. So quite a lot of issues have been happening and in regard to the water. And for this matter now, I just want to trade this question into this forum. If there are other measures we can try to mitigate these issues. Is it all about the climatic condition? Because even when we were young, we used to hear from our parents that the water was there, but it was not in excess. The water, the lakes or the river were not swelling to the extent of reaching even to the villages, causing displacement, destruction of crops and livestock. So could it be because of climate change? And what could be the possible ways, of course, to be able to overcome these challenges? Again, there is the issue of water, as you have mentioned before, that the water passes from here up to Egypt. In fact, it passes from here up to Uganda, from Uganda to South Sudan, from South Sudan up to Egypt. And now a time when, there was the issue where our government used to have, they used to have issues with water, and they were able to say that we want to do some drainage, to allow the water flow from here to Egypt. And we were able to see a lot of questions being raised internationally, saying that, you cannot have too much water to the extent that you allow that water to pass. So it will bring repercussions to the civil population. So to narrow my question into areas of focus, I'm just trying to say that is this associated to the climate change? And if that is the case now, what are the measures? Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Makwer. Let me just be very fast. I think for me, there could be a number of factors. Climate change could be one of them. Also is the question of planning, appropriate planning. So for example, if you're saying that herders are not getting sufficient water, there's also, for the people that do environmental economics, they will tell you there's something called the carrying capacity of any given area. So the question would be, the animals available there, are they in line with the kind of resources that are there? For example, if it's the water. So for me, one, it would be a question of proper planning. And also the other question would be, what is the state of degradation, for example, on the sources of the water itself? So are we maybe cutting down trees? Are we destroying aquifers in our countries? Are we destroying water sources, maybe from the mountainous areas, people inhabiting these areas? This could be some of the factors that are contributing to this. But also, of course, it's a fact that climate change is contributing heavily to increased reduction in water access across the world. So this could also be a problem. But you see, even if it's climate change, it means that we need to start now seeking solutions from a local level and trying to ask ourselves, how can we be able to adapt? And one of them, measures to adapt, is by protecting water sources. If, for example, we have mountainous areas where we have forests and you know that this is where the water is coming from, can we ensure that we protect it in a way that is utilized well? So I know sometimes that people could be also be staying in near water sources, and because they're using the water, sometimes they're able maybe to also degrade the sources. There exist instruments that have been developed both in policy frameworks that can help in safeguarding such sources. So there's a principle called, again, the payment for ecosystem services. That if people are living, for example, next to a water source, they are able to protect that water source, to ensure that it serves them, but also serves people that are downstream, away from them. But in return, the people downstream, when they pay for the resources that they are using, for example, in Kenya, we pay Nairobi Water Company for water bills, that a chunk of that bill goes back to developing the areas where this water is being, the water source is being protected. And you see, in this case, there's some sort of symbiotic relationship where the people upstream and downstream benefit from the water, and some also get an extra benefit by virtue of protecting the water source that is serving the world. So this could be one intervention, that we have such frameworks in our countries that maybe we want to introduce, that could help save our water sources. But the other key and important source, again, is education. Educating our people to understand why are we maybe facing water shortages, and then coming up again with potential remedies that could be able to provide the solutions that we are looking for as a society or as a country.
Hoping. Okay, you can continue.
My name is Adio Gabulat Zegibul from Emmanuel Aligned University of Education, Nigeria. My question goes, how can the government ensure that those that are not in school leads for impact, as the topic for today implies, leading for impact in climate change? And the second question is that how can efficient intergovernmental relationship collaborate for the impact in the climate change?
Sorry, I didn't get the first bit of the question. The link between education, if you can repeat that, please.
Gabriel, you're muted. Or you can type in the question. Okay, continue. Gabriel, type in your question. You can type in your question so that we'll cover them before we end the meeting. Maybe you can go to Salaudin. Salaudin Bukar. You can go to the next person so that after that I can read a few questions from the chat. Or Margaret. A few questions from the chat. I can see Karen is saying, thank you so much for the lecture, sir. How can a leader align their vision and action to create long-term positive change?
Yes, thanks for the question. And I think it's it's a good question. So how do you align your vision and action to achieve positive change? For me, one is knowledge. That get as much knowledge as possible to first of all understand the areas in which you want to intervene. And then after doing this is start small, start implementing what you're doing. You know, ideas are just ideas until they're put into action. So you can have the best ideas in the world, but until you start implementing them and then linking them to the vision that you have, nothing will ever happen. Imagine if the person that came up with the innovation of the aircraft had not built maybe the first aircraft, and maybe it fell down and it maybe didn't fly as far as you wanted them to fly and all that. Would we be having flights today? So the thing is, educate yourself, get the necessary knowledge, the necessary mentorship and the guidance that you need. But again, even after getting all this, you must translate knowledge to action. That we must move away from the theoretical to the action. And through action, sometimes you'll fail, sometimes you will succeed, but remain focused to what you want to achieve. And there will be distractions. And I know there are people who will be saying, what are you doing? Oh, this can't make sense and all that. But again, the person who matters at the end of the day is the person that did something, not just the person that talked and all that. So to summarize again, knowledge, right mentorship, then not forgetting your vision, then implement what you want to do.
Okay, another question from Salaudin. What role do international agreements play in environmental laws, and how do individuals or organizations contribute to environmental protection?
So what role do environmental agreements play in terms of protecting the environment? So one, you see, once countries sign and ratify any international agreement that is discussed and concluded internationally, it's always assumed that this law will be taken back and implemented in their countries. So the agreement is done internationally, but once you sign and ratify, so the signing, then there is the depositing of the instrument of ratification with the relevant authority or the relevant body that is governing the agreement that you've signed. It means that you are now kind of capped with this law. So you are supposed to operate within the prism of the law that you have signed and agreed upon. The one key challenge on international agreement is that there's always very little or no means of following up. Like there's no police to follow up to ensure that you're implementing the agreement that you've been able to sign. So it's always assumed that the countries that have signed these laws will act in good faith to the law that they have signed. But again, as you know, people are just people. Sometimes you sign things with other interest, maybe to get more funding for what you want to achieve in your country, and you just end up not implementing it. How can individuals be able to contribute to some of these agreements? And this is where the aspect of advocacy, citizen advocacy, but also maybe coming up with civil society organization that could be able to champion for important causes that matter to the societies that they live in. Leaders, both in their countries, but also internationally, and then these are taken up. I'll give you a clear example that at the COP, Conference of Parties for the UNFCCC, we see very many CSOs coming in. CSO, the civil society organization. They come in and they provide their kind of memorandums, and these memorandums are taken into consideration when final negotiations and decisions are made at the international level. So the people have power. They don't have just sit back and pretend and maybe wait for the people to work for them. And like we looked at the question of the principle of public participation. It is practiced nationally, but also at the international level is still being practiced a lot. So the citizenry can maybe come together, draft a piece of policy that they want maybe to ensure that it's adopted by the governments, or also challenge what's being proposed. And with that, it can be mainstreamed in the international agreements that are settled on.
Yeah, I can see Gabriel has posted the question. He's asking, how can intergovernment collaboration lead for impact for climate change? And also, first question was, how can the government ensure that those that are not in schools lead impact in the climate change action?
So the question is, how can the government ensure those that are not in school lead impact in climate change action? So the thing is this, climate change is not a preserve of only the people that are in school or the elite, as you may want to call them. Climate change affects each and every one of us. And in fact, those that are least informed are even more impacted. So the government should be able to come up with tailor-made solutions that will be able to communicate some of this information even to those people that are not maybe literate. An example here could be, you can come up maybe with, there are theater groups I think in every country. You could be able to dramatize some of these challenges that communities are facing, and through the dramas that you're doing, you pass key messages, including using local or vernacular languages that could be able to be understood by everyone. But also demonstrate these things in a way that is understood by everybody. And a case in point here could be people maybe that are maybe blind, or people that are deaf, people that can't speak, people that can't hear. How do you ensure that you tailor messages in a way that reaches them so that they're also not left behind? They understand each and everything. And also we know, again, the example of Kenya, there's the Chiefs Baraza. The governments can use such forums to ensure that they communicate some of this important information in simple ways that everybody can be able to understand. And as a whole, and as such, everybody takes up action, and we all fight this challenge of climate change as a unit and not as segmented forces.
As we are finalizing, the last question on the chat from Changendo, how can we balance the emission of methane? Because most of our society are doing agricultural activities, and we know methane is a powerful greenhouse gas which is only second to carbon dioxide.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and that's a very good question. And we know that for many economies in Africa, we normally say that the backbone of our economies is agriculture. So how, and essentially methane is normally coming maybe from animals that we rear, that we have in our farms and all that. So the whole question is, how do we control this? We've had cases where I know there are some researches that are being done, for example, by the International Livestock Research Institute in Kenya, and we've had quite some uproar in the country in terms of immunizing animals, or maybe injecting animals with some immunization to ensure that the methane they produce is reduced or less lethal to the environment. So for the context of Africa, honestly, I would like to admit and say that I don't know what we can really do as a continent, but maybe continuous research to ensure that we try and get solutions that will be able to provide us with means to ensure that we control the methane that's being produced, but at the same time, not locking ourselves out of having animals. Like we know, animals are some of, like, this is livelihoods for many people in Africa. So if you say that, for example, you want to do away with animals because they produce methane, it means that you're killing the economic livelihoods of very, very many people. So we must be able to strike a balance and think of a way that can ensure that yes, the animals are there, but also to get scientific knowledge or also traditional knowledge, indigenous knowledge in this case, that could be able to ensure that methane that's produced in the atmosphere is not as lethal as it is at the moment. But honestly, as in the question of methane, I admit also here, I don't have a concrete answer I can give to this. It's a question for me of maybe continuous research and trying to see what could be the solution.
Maybe I see time is not on our side. Maybe Karim, I can see your hand is up. That you can ask a question, and that will be the last one before you conclude. Yeah, Karim, you can unmute. Thank you for an engageful meeting. On behalf of everyone here, I would like to sincerely thank you, Ignatius Juma, for your insightful and inspiring talk. The depth of knowledge, clarity in breaking down complex issues, and genuine passion for climate change and youth empowerment have left a lasting impression on us. We are grateful for the time you took to share your experiences and wisdom, and for challenging us to lead with purpose and impact. Thank you once again for being with us today.
Yes, and thank you very much too for affording me the opportunity to speak to all of us. It was an honor, honestly, speaking to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Karim will ask a question next time, since